The white woman, Hannah, shouted at the black boy. "Move! I can't sit beside you. You don't belong on this flight." Then she pulled out her phone and dialed out her friend, turning slightly away from the black boy, Phoenix. "Melissa, you won't believe who they sat me next to on this flight." Her eyes darted sideways to ensure Phoenix was listening. The standards have really fallen in first class these days. There's literally a black child beside me. Yes, a black child. And not even a well-dressed one. I specifically booked first class to avoid certain elements. And now they've got me practically babysitting an ape. At these prices. I will make sure I frustrate him on this trip. Hannah had no idea she was making the biggest mistake of her life. She didn't know who was watching when she crossed the line. Now there was no escape, no way to run, no place to hide. Just the consequences of her actions playing out in front of a plane full of witnesses with smartphone cameras already recording. In this story, you're about to witness the biggest karma that has ever occurred on a flight this year. And if you stand against prejudice and believe no one should be treated unfairly because of their skin color, hit that subscribe button now and type justice in the comments. It all began 3 hours earlier at LaGuardia Airport, where 8-year-old Phoenix Reynolds was about to experience the worst flight of his young life. The bustling Terminal B was filled with the usual chaos of a Friday afternoon. Among the sea of hurried travelers stood 8-year-old Phoenix Reynolds, his wide eyes taking in the excitement of the massive departures board above him. Phoenix wasn't your typical 8-year-old. The son of billionaire hotel magnate Marcus Reynolds, he carried himself with a quiet dignity that belied his years. Today, he wore a simple blue button-down shirt and khaki pants, understated, just as his father had taught him. "Our character speaks louder than our clothes," Marcus always said. At his side stood Vivian, his nanny for the past 3 years. She checked her watch nervously. "Your father's running a bit late for the flight, but he texted that he'll definitely make it before boarding closes," she explained, adjusting Phoenix's backpack. "Now remember what we packed for the flight?" Phoenix nodded confidently. "My book about space, my drawing pad, my headphones, and the special juice boxes that don't spill easily." He recited the list with pride. This wasn't his first rodeo in the skies. What made today special was the first-class ticket clutched in Phoenix's hand. A reward from his father for maintaining straight A's all semester, despite the challenges of being in an advanced program. Marcus Reynolds believed in teaching his son the connection between hard work and reward, even when money was no object for their family. The pair made their way to the exclusive first-class lounge, where Phoenix's ticket granted them access. As they settled into the plush seats, Vivian's phone buzzed urgently. Her face fell as she read the message. "Phoenix, I'm so sorry, but my sister has been taken to the hospital." Worry creased her normally calm features. "She's been in an accident and needs someone there right away." Phoenix's eyes widened with concern. "Is she going to be okay?" "I hope so, but I need to go to her now." Vivian bit her lip, clearly torn between her responsibilities. "Your father will be here soon, but will you be fine all alone till he comes?" The young boy straightened his shoulders, summoning his most grown-up voice. "It's okay, Vivian. I've flown with Dad lots of times. I'll be fine waiting by myself until he gets here." After several more assurances and a quick call to Marcus confirming he was indeed en route, Vivian reluctantly departed, leaving Phoenix seated primarily in the first-class lounge with his book about the solar system already open on his lap. For 30 minutes, everything was fine. Phoenix read his book, occasionally glancing up to watch planes take off through the massive windows. The lounge attendants, recognizing him as a Reynolds, discreetly checked on him while respecting his space. Then Hannah Mercer entered the lounge. Hannah was everything Phoenix wasn't. Loud, demanding, and obsessed with appearances. Her designer suit probably cost more than what most people in the terminal earned in a month. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe style that matched her expression. As the senior VP of marketing for the Lux Hotel Group, the main competitor to Reynolds Hospitality Hotel, Hannah was accustomed to getting exactly what she wanted when she wanted it. Her sharp eyes scanned the lounge, immediately landing on Phoenix, the only child in the premium space. Her lips pursed as if she'd tasted something sour. Approaching the check-in desk, she made no effort to lower her voice. "Is that child really flying first class?" The question dripped with disbelief and something darker. The gate agent glanced over at Phoenix, who had shrunk slightly behind his book, pretending not to hear. "Yes, ma'am, he has a valid first-class ticket." Hannah's eyebrows arched dramatically. "Really? And he's what, 7? I wouldn't know, ma'am, but his ticket is in order." The agent's professional tone concealed any offense at the questioning. "They're letting anyone in these days," Hannah muttered, loud enough for both the agent and Phoenix to hear clearly. "First class used to mean something." Phoenix kept his eyes fixed on his book, but his small shoulders tensed. He'd heard comments like this before. His father had explained that some people carried ugliness in their hearts and projected it onto others. Hannah settled herself at the far end of the lounge, occasionally shooting glances at Phoenix, as if his mere presence contaminated the exclusive space. When the pre-boarding announcement came for their flight to San Francisco, Hannah gathered her things with sharp, irritated movements. Phoenix texted his father, "We're boarding now. How close are you?" The response came quickly. "Traffic is terrible. Go ahead and board. Save our seats. I'll make it before the doors close. Love you, champ." As Phoenix approached the gate, his first-class ticket in hand, he found himself directly behind Hannah in the priority boarding line. He could feel her eyes on him, assessing, judging. The gate agent smiled warmly at Phoenix. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Reynolds. Enjoy your flight." The gleaming cabin of the first-class section welcomed Phoenix as he stepped aboard the flight to San Francisco. The soft lighting and spacious seating were familiar to him, though the experience never lost its magic. Unlike many privileged children, Phoenix never took these luxuries for granted, a testament to his father's intentional parenting. He made his way down the aisle, his boarding pass indicating seat 3A, a window seat with a perfect view of the wing and beyond. He settled in, carefully placing his backpack under the seat in front of him. The leather seat dwarfed his small frame as he buckled his seatbelt and pulled out his book about space exploration. Phoenix had dreams of becoming an astronaut someday. Not that he needed to work with his father's billions, but Marcus had instilled in him a deep belief that purpose came from contribution, not inheritance. The peaceful moment didn't last long. Phoenix's vision caught a flash of movement as Hannah Mercer stopped abruptly in the aisle beside his row. Her eyes darted from her boarding pass to the seat number above, then back to Phoenix. The realization that she would be sitting next to the child she had just disparaged in the lounge twisted her features into a mask of displeasure. "Excuse me," Hannah called sharply to a passing flight attendant. "Tasha, according to her name tag. There must be some mistake with my seating assignment." Tasha approached with a professional smile. "How can I help you, ma'am?" Hannah lowered her voice, but not enough to prevent Phoenix from hearing every word. "I didn't pay $3,000 for a first-class ticket to sit next to a child," she said, her eyes flicking dismissively toward Phoenix. Then she added with a meaningful look, "Especially a black one." The implication hung in the air, clear, ugly, unmistakable. Tasha's smile remained fixed, but her eyes hardened slightly. She'd been flying long enough to recognize the coded language of prejudice. "I understand your concern, ma'am, but I'm afraid the flight is completely full today. We have no other available seats in first class." "What about an empty seat in business class? I'd rather sit there than..." Hannah trailed off, gesturing vaguely toward Phoenix, who pretended to be absorbed in his book. I apologize, but we're at full capacity today. Every seat on the aircraft is assigned. Tasha's tone was polite but firm. If you'd prefer to take a later flight, I can check availability, but you would need to deplane now and speak with the gate agent. Hannah's face flushed with anger as she glanced at her watch. That's impossible. I have a meeting tomorrow morning that I cannot miss. With a dramatic sigh, she reluctantly slid into seat 3B. Phoenix could feel waves of hostility radiating from her as she aggressively stowed her designer bag in the overhead compartment, nearly hitting another passenger in the process. Hannah settled into her seat, shifting as far away from Phoenix as the confines of first class would allow, pressing herself against the opposite armrest as if proximity to the child might somehow contaminate her. The space between them seemed charged with tension as other passengers continued boarding. Phoenix, raised to be unfailingly polite despite any circumstance, gathered his courage and turned toward his roommate. "Hello, ma'am, I'm Phoenix," he said in a clear, well-modulated voice, extending his small hand. "Nice to meet you." Hannah stared at his outstretched hand as if he'd offered her a dead fish. Her eyes traveled from his hand to his face with such naked contempt that several nearby passengers exchanged uncomfortable glances. "Look," she said in a low, cutting tone. "I don't think you belong in first class. Your kind should stay in the back." The words landed like physical blows. Phoenix's hand slowly retreated, his hopeful expression crumbling before reassembling into a careful mask of dignity. He'd encountered racism before, but the raw hostility from this stranger still cut deep. The silver-haired woman across the aisle gasped audibly. A businessman in the row ahead turned to stare, but no one said anything. That peculiar public display that enables bad behavior to continue unchecked. Phoenix quietly turned away, focusing his gaze out the window, where ground crews scurried about their duties. Hannah pulled out a pair of expensive noise-canceling headphones, the latest model that hadn't even hit the market yet, and placed them over her ears with exaggerated relief, as if she'd successfully created a barrier between herself and the child she found so objectionable. The flight attendants moved through the cabin, offering pre-departure beverages to the first-class passengers. When Tasha reached their row, she gave Phoenix a warm smile. "Would you like some apple juice, young man?" she asked. Phoenix nodded politely. "Yes, please. Thank you." Hannah interrupted without removing her headphones. "Make sure he doesn't spill it. I'm wearing Armani." Tasha's smile cooled several degrees as she handed Phoenix his juice in the spill-resistant cup reserved for younger passengers. "I'm sure he'll be careful. He seems very responsible." The pointed comment sailed over Hannah's head as she tapped impatiently on her armrest, already scrolling through emails on her phone. Phoenix's phone vibrated with an incoming message. It was from his father. "Running late, boarding last minute. See you soon." A small smile lifted the corners of his mouth. Soon, his dad would be here, and everything would be okay. Marcus Reynolds had a way of making spaces feel safer, just by his presence. Phoenix took a careful sip of his juice and returned to his book, determined to maintain his composure until his father arrived. As the remaining passengers filed onto the aircraft, Hannah Mercer's displeasure seemed to grow with each passing minute. Her body language screamed discomfort. Arms tightly crossed, posture rigid, jaw clenched. She checked her watch repeatedly, her irritation building like pressure in a sealed container. The cabin door remained open as the final passengers boarded, but there was still no sign of Marcus Reynolds. Phoenix glanced anxiously toward the entrance every few moments, his small shoulders gradually tensing under the weight of Hannah's obvious disdain. When the "please turn off all electronic devices" announcement hadn't yet been made, Hannah seized the opportunity. She pulled out her phone and dialed her friend, Melissa, hoping to get help to remove Phoenix from his seat. Phoenix's attempt to disappear into his seat was heartbreaking to witness. His small body seemed to contract, shoulders hunching forward, knees pulling together, arms tucking in tight against his sides. He was physically making himself smaller, trying to minimize his presence, a defense mechanism no 8-year-old should have mastered. A different flight attendant, James, according to his name tag, approached their row, having noticed the one-sided conversation. "Ma'am, we'll be closing the cabin doors soon. You'll need to switch your phone to airplane mode," he said professionally. Hannah waved him off dismissively while wrapping up her call. "I've got to go, Melissa." "Yes, I'll definitely file a complaint about the seating arrangement. This is completely unacceptable." As she finally ended the call, Hannah turned to James with an exaggerated sigh. "I cannot believe your airline expects paying customers to babysit during their flights. Is there any possibility of a seat change? Anywhere else would be preferable." James's professional facade didn't slip, but his eyes briefly flicked to Phoenix, noting the child's withdrawn posture and downcast eyes. "I apologize, but we're completely full today, as my colleague mentioned earlier," he explained. Then, quite deliberately, he turned his full attention to Phoenix. "Young man, would you like some extra snacks for the flight? We have some special cookies that aren't part of our regular service." Phoenix looked up, surprised momentarily, displacing his discomfort. "Yes, please, thank you," he replied softly. "I'll bring those right over once we're at cruising altitude," James promised with a warm smile. Turning back to Hannah, his expression cooled noticeably. "Is there anything else you need, ma'am?" Hannah's lips tightened. "Just some peace and quiet would be nice," she muttered, glaring at Phoenix as if he'd been chattering non-stop instead of sitting in silent endurance of her abuse. As James moved away, the captain's voice came over the intercom, announcing they were third in line for takeoff. The cabin door was closed. Marcus had not made it aboard. Phoenix's face fell as he realized his father wouldn't be joining him after all. He reached for his phone, likely to check for messages, but the flight attendants were already ensuring all devices were switched off for departure. Everyone was ready for takeoff, leaving Phoenix alone with his tormentor for the next 5 hours. Hannah made a show of checking her watch again, sighing dramatically, and reclining her seat to the maximum allowed position, another small act of dominance over the shared space. James soon returned as promised with a special package of cookies for Phoenix. "These are actually my favorite," he confided with a wink. "They're usually reserved for our international first-class service." Phoenix's genuine thank you was met with another eye roll from Hannah, who had already summoned a different flight attendant to order a glass of champagne to help endure this flight. For a brief period, an uneasy calm settled over the cabin. Phoenix quietly read his book while carefully eating his cookies, making sure not even a single crumb fell on his side of the armrest. Hannah alternated between working on her laptop and casting irritated glances at her seatmate. Approximately 45 minutes into the flight, the captain's voice returned over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're expecting some turbulence ahead. I've turned on the fasten seatbelt sign. Please return to your seats and ensure your seatbelts are securely fastened." Hannah had just left for the restroom moments before. Phoenix continued reading, already safely buckled in his seat. When Hannah finally returned, her face was flushed with irritation as she noticed Phoenix's space exploration book, and the corner of his small backpack had shifted slightly onto her side of their shared area during the rocky air. Hannah's reaction was wildly disproportionate. She grabbed Phoenix's book and backpack, shoving them roughly back toward him. "Keep your things on your side," she snapped, loud enough for several rows to hear. The book tumbled from Phoenix's hands, falling to the floor. The backpack, which had barely encroached on Hannah's space, was now crumpled against the window. "I'm sorry," Phoenix said quietly, his eyes downcast as he reached down to retrieve his book. The pages had bent when it fell, creating a permanent crease in his prized possession. Hannah wasn't finished. As if his quiet apology had further provoked her, she leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper intended for his ears alone. "I bet your parents didn't teach you manners." Typical. The word typical hung in the air between them, loaded with prejudice and assumption. Phoenix's small face remained carefully composed, but the slight trembling of his hands as he straightened his book pages revealed the impact of her words. In the row directly behind them, a first-class seat remained empty. The seat was assigned to Marcus Reynolds, who had apparently missed the flight. Phoenix was truly on his own, enduring an escalating barrage of hostility from a woman who had no idea that her actions were being observed by more than just the uncomfortable passengers around them. A flight attendant passing by noticed Phoenix's reddened eyes but misinterpreted the cause. She quietly offered him a tissue, which he accepted with a polite nod. Hannah's smug expression suggested she believed she'd put the child properly in his place. Have you ever witnessed someone mistreating a child in public and wished you could do something about it? What would you have done in this situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel now. The tension between Hannah and Phoenix was building toward an explosive confrontation. But suddenly, a strange thing happened. The aircraft door was opened for someone. A commotion erupted at the entrance. Marcus Reynolds, impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal suit despite his rush, was escorted aboard by the lead flight attendant. His commanding presence caused several passengers to look up and take notice, except for those in row 3, where Phoenix sat trapped in his own private nightmare. "We appreciate you holding the flight, Captain," Marcus said, his deep voice carrying the natural authority of someone accustomed to being heard. The traffic situation was unprecedented. Marcus made his way down the aisle of first class, his eyes searching for his son. When he spotted Phoenix sitting by the window, tension visibly eased from his broad shoulders. What he also noticed, and what made his brow furrow slightly, was the rigid posture of his son and the clear discomfort on the child's face. Checking his boarding pass, Marcus was surprised to find his seat assignment was directly behind Phoenix and the woman seated next to him. This hadn't been the original arrangement. He'd booked adjacent seats for himself and Phoenix, but the last-minute rebooking due to his delay had resulted in this new configuration. Marcus slid into his seat without drawing attention from either Phoenix or Hannah. He could see the back of his son's head, the small shoulders held too tight for a child his age. Marcus pulled out his noise-canceling headphones and placed them over his ears, then opened his tablet to check emails that had accumulated during his mad dash to the airport. His business empire didn't stop for flight delays. Distracted by an urgent message from his London office, Marcus focused on his screen for those crucial few minutes, unaware of the tension building to a breaking point just inches away. The aircraft had reached cruising altitude, and the seatbelt sign had been turned off. Flight attendants moved through the cabin offering beverages. When they reached row 3, Phoenix politely requested apple juice, while Hannah ordered sparkling water with a proper glass, not plastic. The drinks were served, and Phoenix carefully placed his juice on his tray table, meticulously making sure it was stable. However, fate intervened in the form of unexpected turbulence, a sudden drop that caught everyone by surprise. The juice toppled despite Phoenix's precautions. Most of it splashed onto his own tray and lap, but a small amount, no more than a few drops, spattered onto the sleeve of Hannah's designer suit. Phoenix's reaction was immediate and sincere. He grabbed his napkin and held it out to Hannah, his eyes wide with genuine concern. "I'm so sorry, ma'am," he said, his voice steady despite his obvious anxiety. The turbulence made it spill. Please use my napkin. It was a reasonable response to a minor accident. The kind of thing that happens countless times on flights around the world every day. Most adults would have accepted the apology, dabbed at the small spots, and moved on with their day. But Hannah Mercer was not most adults. Her reaction was so disproportionate, so immediate, that passengers several rows away would later describe it as explosive. Her face contorted with rage as she stared at the tiny droplets on her sleeve, as if they were battery acid eating through her skin. "This is a $5,000 suit," she screamed, causing conversations throughout the cabin to halt abruptly. "Do you have any idea what you've done? You people don't understand the value of things." The phrase, "you people," hung in the air like poison, its implication unmistakable to everyone within earshot. Several passengers exchanged shocked glances, while others deliberately looked away, uncomfortable with the escalating scene. Phoenix's hand, still offering the napkin, began to tremble slightly. "I said I was sorry, ma'am," he repeated, his voice smaller now, fighting to maintain composure despite the public humiliation. A glistening in his eyes betrayed the tears he was struggling to hold back. "Sorry doesn't fix this," she spat, her voice dripping with contempt. "You shouldn't even be in first class." Then, in a moment that would soon be viewed by millions across social media platforms worldwide, Hannah Mercer crossed a line from which there was no return. In a burst of uncontrolled rage, she raised her hand and slapped Phoenix Reynolds hard across his face. The sound of the slap seemed to echo through the suddenly silent cabin. Phoenix's head snapped sideways from the force of the blow, his small body frozen in shock. "Maybe that will teach you some manners," Hannah added, her voice still raised in righteous indignation. Phoenix didn't cry out. Instead, a single tear tracked down his cheek as he raised a trembling hand to his face where an angry red mark was already forming. The cabin erupted in gasps and murmurs. A woman across the aisle covered her mouth in horror. A businessman halfway down the cabin stood up, uncertain what to do but clearly feeling compelled to act. And in the row behind, something shifted in the atmosphere as Marcus Reynolds slowly removed his headphones, his face a mask of disbelief at what he had just witnessed. "Oh my God, she just hit that kid," someone whispered loudly. "Did you see that?" Another passenger exclaimed. A young woman in the row beside Hannah already had her phone out, having captured the entire incident on video. The flight attendants, alerted by the commotion, were rapidly making their way toward row 3. Hannah, suddenly aware of the attention her actions had drawn, straightened in her seat, her expression suggesting she felt completely justified. "He ruined my suit," she said to no one in particular, as if that explained and excused her assault on a child. Phoenix remained silent, one hand still pressed to his cheek, his eyes downcast in a dignity far beyond his years. In the row directly behind them, Marcus Reynolds carefully set his tablet and headphones aside. His movements were deliberate, controlled, a sharp contrast to the chaos of emotions surely raging within him. Anyone who knew Marcus would have recognized the calm precision of his movements as the most dangerous sign of all. The billionaire real estate magnate rose from his seat with the measured grace of a predator. His expression betrayed nothing, but his eyes, fixed on the back of Hannah Mercer's head, contained a cold fury that would have made braver souls than her tremble. Taking a single step forward, Marcus positioned himself directly beside row 3, now visible to both Hannah and Phoenix for the first time. His presence seemed to alter the very atmosphere of the cabin, a force of nature contained in human form. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, controlled, and all the more terrifying for its restraint. "How dare you strike my son?" 6 words that would change Hannah Mercer's life forever. Phoenix looked up, relief flooding his features. "Dad?" he whispered, the single word carrying volumes of emotion. Hannah turned toward the voice, irritation at this new interruption clear on her face, until recognition dawned. The color drained from her cheeks as she realized who was standing beside her, who had witnessed her assault on the child, who was now looking at her with eyes that promised consequences beyond her worst nightmares. Marcus Reynolds, billionaire, philanthropist, and the father of the child she had just slapped across the face. What do you think is the appropriate consequence for someone who strikes a child in public? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and hit the subscribe button now. Time seemed to stand still in the pressurized cabin as Marcus Reynolds' words hung in the air between them. Hannah Mercer's face underwent a remarkable transformation, from righteous indignation to dawning horror as recognition set in. Marcus Reynolds wasn't just any father. He was one of the 50 wealthiest people in America. His name adorned buildings across the country. His company owned the very hotel where she was supposed to present her marketing pitch tomorrow, and she had just slapped his son across the face. "Mr. Reynolds," she stammered, her voice suddenly stripped of its previous authority. There's been a terrible misunderstanding." Marcus didn't acknowledge her words. Instead, he knelt beside Phoenix, gently turning the boy's face to examine the red mark blooming across his cheek. His thumb brushed away the solitary tear that had escaped despite Phoenix's brave efforts. "Are you all right, son?" he asked quietly, his controlled tone belying the fury evident in the tension of his shoulders, the tightness around his eyes. Phoenix nodded, relief washing over his features now that his father was here. "I'm okay, Dad," he whispered. Marcus straightened to his full height, an imposing 6'3". His tailored suit couldn't hide the athletic build of a man who spent hours in his private gym before most people's alarms went off. Hannah seemed to shrink in her seat as his focus returned to her. "And I heard everything you said to him before that," Marcus stated, his voice deceptively calm. Those who knew him in business circles would have recognized the danger signs, the controlled breathing, the precision of his movements, the absolute stillness of his expression. Hannah's eyes widened as the implications sank in. "Sir, please understand, I didn't know he was your son." "What I understand," Marcus interrupted, "is that you told my 8-year-old son that his kind should stay in the back. I understand that you said he doesn't belong in first class. I understand that you physically assaulted a child because he accidentally spilled a few drops of juice during turbulence." Each accusation landed like a hammer blow. Several passengers nodded in confirmation. The young woman who had recorded the slap had positioned herself in the aisle, continuing to document the confrontation. Now Hannah could see what Marcus had witnessed during his time seated behind them. The series of degrading comments, the deliberate humiliations, the escalating hostility that had culminated in that slap. The flashback playing in her mind must have been excruciating as she realized the powerful man had heard every racist remark, every entitled complaint, every attempt to make Phoenix feel lesser. "Those weren't my exact words," she attempted weakly. "There's context you're missing. I would never." "Flight attendant," Marcus called, his eyes never leaving Hannah's face. His voice carried without being raised, the natural authority of someone accustomed to being listened to. James, the flight attendant, who had earlier shown kindness to Phoenix, appeared almost immediately. "Yes, sir?" "I'd like to speak with the air marshal on this flight," Marcus stated. "A passenger has physically assaulted my minor son, and I intend to press charges." The words "press charges" seemed to finally break through Hannah's shock. "No, wait, you can't be serious." Panic bloomed across her features. "It was barely a tap. He ruined my suit." By now, 2 additional flight attendants had arrived, along with the chief purser. The commotion had drawn the attention of the entire first-class cabin and beyond, with passengers in business class craning their necks to see what was happening. Sir, we take any physical altercation extremely seriously, the chief purser assured Marcus. I've already alerted the captain, and our air marshal will meet us soon. We'll need statements from everyone involved and any witnesses. A middle-aged woman seated across the aisle spoke up immediately. I saw everything. That woman, she pointed directly at Hannah, slapped the child after he accidentally spilled his drink during turbulence. He apologized politely, and she hit him anyway. She's been awful to him since boarding, added another passenger, a distinguished-looking gentleman in his 60s, making comments about him not belonging in first class, disgraceful behavior. Hannah's head swiveled from one accuser to the next, the reality of her situation beginning to sink in. Her face had gone from pale to ashen as her professional future began to dissolve before her eyes. This is ridiculous, she attempted, her voice higher than before. It was a simple misunderstanding. The child was disruptive the entire flight. Marcus's expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. He turned to Phoenix, his voice gentling. Son, has she been treating you like this the whole flight? Phoenix glanced at Hannah, then back to his father. Despite everything, there was a moment of hesitation, a child's natural reluctance to get anyone in trouble, even someone who had mistreated him. It's okay to tell the truth, Marcus assured him. You're not the one causing trouble here. Phoenix nodded slowly. Yes, Dad, he admitted quietly. Since we got on the plane, but I didn't want to cause problems. I knew you were coming, and I thought I could just wait. The simple dignity in his son's response seemed to affect Marcus deeply. He placed a hand on Phoenix's shoulder, a gesture of both comfort and pride. You did nothing wrong, he said firmly, ensuring his son heard the words clearly. Then, straightening again, the warmth in his expression vanished as he turned back to Hannah. The air marshal had arrived, a plain-clothed man with an unmistakable air of authority. I understand there's been an incident involving a minor, he said, professionally assessing the situation. This woman struck my son across the face, Marcus stated flatly. There are multiple witnesses and I believe at least one passenger has video evidence. I want her arrested when we land. Hannah began to truly panic now. No, please, you don't understand what this will do to my career, my life. Perhaps you should have considered that before assaulting a child, responded the air marshal without sympathy. The young woman who had been recording stepped forward. I have the whole thing on video, she confirmed. I started recording when she began yelling about her suit. I can email it to you right now. I appreciate that, the air marshal said. Please also keep that video secured. It will be important evidence. Hannah's breathing had become rapid and shallow, the reality of her situation crashing down around her. Mr. Reynolds, please, she tried again, desperation clear in every syllable. I have a presentation tomorrow. This is a crucial deal for my company. Surely we can resolve this without involving the authorities. Marcus regarded her with the same expression he used when considering whether to demolish a failing property or repurpose it. The time for private resolution passed the moment you put your hands on my son, he said, each word precisely measured. You chose your actions. Now you can face their consequences. The chief purser stepped in. Ma'am, we'll need to move you to a different seat for the remainder of the flight. Mr. Reynolds, we can offer you and your son more comfortable arrangements as well. Marcus nodded. I'd appreciate that. My son has been through enough today. As Hannah was escorted to exchange a seat with another person in the last row of business class, a public demotion that seemed fitting, given her earlier comments, the whispers throughout the cabin grew louder. Passengers were already on their phones, some texting about the incident, others searching for information about the players in this real-life drama. And in the digital realm, things were moving even faster. The video of Hannah slapping Phoenix had already been uploaded to social media with the caption, Woman slaps billionaire's son on flight, doesn't know dad is sitting behind her. Within minutes, it had been shared hundreds of times. By the time the plane landed, that number would reach tens of thousands. Marcus settled into his new seat beside Phoenix, who leaned against his father's shoulder, the ordeal finally catching up with him. "I'm proud of how you handled yourself," Marcus told him quietly. "Your mother would be proud too." Phoenix managed a small smile at the mention of his late mother. She always said dignity can't be taken, only surrendered. Meanwhile, Hannah sat isolated in her new seat, her phone blowing up with notifications. Her boss had already texted, "Just saw a video of you hitting a child on a plane. Is that really Marcus Reynolds' son?" The video was spreading like wildfire across the internet. Hannah's career, reputation, and future were disintegrating with each passing minute, all because she couldn't control her prejudice and temper for a few hours on a flight. Justice was already being served at 35,000 feet, but the full reckoning was yet to come. For Hannah Mercer, this wasn't just a bad day. It was the beginning of the end of life as she knew it. What would you do if someone slaps your child in your presence? Share your thoughts in the comments. As the flight began its descent, Hannah Mercer was about to discover that her actions had set in motion consequences far beyond anything she could have imagined. When powerful people like Marcus Reynolds get involved, justice isn't just swift. It's comprehensive. As the aircraft continued its journey toward San Francisco, the atmosphere in the cabin had irrevocably changed. In the aftermath of Hannah's assault on Phoenix, a strange sense of community had formed among the passengers. Strangers united by their witness to an injustice and its unfolding consequences. The air marshal moved methodically through the cabin, collecting statements from witnesses. One by one, passengers recounted what they had seen and heard. Hannah's persistent belittling of Phoenix, her racist comments, and ultimately the shocking moment when she struck the child across the face. Each testimony built an airtight case against her. Hannah sat isolated in her reassigned seat, a pariah in business class. Flight attendants performed their required duties with icy professionalism, but their warmth was reserved for other passengers. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. From self-important first-class passenger to social outcast in the span of minutes. Meanwhile, Marcus had moved to sit beside Phoenix, his arm protectively around his son's shoulders. The tenderness between them was evident as Marcus examined the fading red mark on Phoenix's cheek. "You know you never have to tolerate being treated that way," Marcus said softly. His words meant only for his son but overheard by nearby passengers. "No one has the right to speak to you like that, let alone put their hands on you." Phoenix looked up at his father, his young face showing wisdom beyond his years. "She said people like us don't belong in first class," he confided quietly. The hurt in his voice was evident, though he tried to hide it. Marcus nodded solemnly. "That's why we must always conduct ourselves with dignity, even when others don't," he explained. "Your response to her behavior showed more class than anything she could ever buy with her money." This quiet father-son moment stood in stark contrast to the digital storm brewing beyond the aircraft. The video of Hannah slapping Phoenix had gone supernova online, spreading across multiple platforms with astonishing speed. Hashtags were forming. First-class assault, flying while black, consequences are real. In her isolated seat, Hannah's phone had begun vibrating non-stop with notifications. As the aircraft briefly passed through an area with in-flight Wi-Fi connectivity, the messages flooded in. Social media alerts, text messages, emails, digital evidence of her life imploding in real time. Among these messages was one that turned her already pale face ghostly white. A text from her CEO. "Meeting canceled. Don't come to the office Monday. HR will contact you." 6 hours ago, Hannah had been preparing to deliver a career-making presentation. Now her professional life was disintegrating at 35,000 feet. As the aircraft began its descent into San Francisco International Airport, the captain's voice came over the intercom with an unusual announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, upon landing, we ask that you remain seated until certain passengers have deplaned. Law enforcement officers will be boarding the aircraft. We appreciate your cooperation. The meaning was clear to everyone on board. Hannah Mercer's day of reckoning wouldn't wait for standard deplaning procedures. When the aircraft reached the gate, the door opened to reveal 4 police officers waiting in the jetway. The lead officer stepped aboard and spoke briefly with the chief purser before approaching Hannah's seat. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us," the officer stated firmly. It wasn't a request. Hannah gathered her belongings with trembling hands, her designer suit now seeming like costume jewelry, flashy but ultimately worthless in the face of real consequences. As she was escorted down the aisle toward the exit, she kept her eyes down, avoiding the stares of her fellow passengers. Just before reaching the door, she passed Marcus and Phoenix's row. For a moment, she paused, perhaps contemplating a final plea or apology. But Marcus's unwavering gaze offered no forgiveness. This wasn't a problem she could talk her way out of with privilege or connections. This was justice in motion. As Hannah disappeared into the jetway flanked by officers, Phoenix watched with mixed emotions evident on his young face. Relief, vindication, but also a certain sadness that spoke to his inherent compassion, even for someone who had treated him so poorly. When Marcus and Phoenix finally deplaned 20 minutes later, they were stunned to find a small contingent of media already gathered at the gate. The video had spread so widely that local news outlets had dispatched reporters to capture the aftermath. Cameras flashed as Marcus guided Phoenix through the terminal, his hand protectively on his son's shoulder. "Mr. Reynolds, can you confirm that your son was assaulted on the flight? Will you be pressing charges against Hannah Mercer? Phoenix, how are you feeling?" Marcus shielded his son from the barrage of questions with practiced ease, offering only a brief statement. "My son was assaulted by another passenger who made racist comments throughout the flight. We're cooperating with authorities, and we ask for privacy as Phoenix processes this unfortunate experience." 3 weeks later, the story had evolved from viral video to national conversation. A news anchor on a major network delivered the update to millions of viewers. Former marketing executive Hannah Mercer has been formally charged with assault on a minor with a hate crime enhancement, following the now infamous airplane incident involving the son of billionaire real estate developer Marcus Reynolds. The anchor continued. In a related development, Reynolds Hospitality Group has announced its acquisition of Lux Hotels International, Mercer's former employer, in a deal finalized yesterday. Industry analysts note that while the acquisition had been rumored for months, the timeline appears to have been accelerated following the incident. Meanwhile, across town, Phoenix Reynolds stood at a podium addressing a youth group focused on leadership and social justice. At just 8 years old, he spoke with remarkable poise about his experience. "It was scary when it happened," he admitted to the room full of children and teenagers. "But my dad always says that how people treat you says more about them than it does about you. Nobody has the right to make you feel like you don't belong somewhere because of what you look like." The young audience applauded enthusiastically, many of them having watched the video that had now been viewed over 70 million times worldwide. Across the city, in a modest neighborhood far from her former luxury high-rise, Hannah Mercer loaded the last of her belongings into a small rental truck. The "For Rent" sign in the window of her former apartment building seemed like the final punctuation mark on her previous life. Her 6-figure job was gone. Her reputation was in tatters. Her legal bills were mounting. and her future had been fundamentally altered by a moment of unchecked prejudice and rage. That same evening, at a gala event for the newly formed Hospitality Industry Diversity Initiative, Marcus Reynolds was introduced as the founding chairman. In his acceptance speech, he spoke about the importance of creating environments where everyone feels welcome. True luxury isn't about exclusivity, he told the assembled industry leaders. It's about dignity, ensuring that every person who walks through our doors is treated with respect, regardless of their appearance, background, or circumstances. The audience rose in a standing ovation, many knowing exactly what had inspired this new focus in Reynolds' already impressive career. 6 months after the incident, Phoenix and Marcus boarded another first-class flight. As they settled into their seats, a flight attendant approached with a warm smile. "Mr. Reynolds, Phoenix, it's wonderful to have you with us today," she said sincerely. "Can I get you anything before takeoff?" Phoenix smiled, the incident now a memory that had shaped him but no longer defined his experience. "Apple juice, please," he requested politely. "In a cup with a lid, just to be safe." Marcus and the flight attendant exchanged knowing smiles at Phoenix's small joke, evidence of healing and resilience in the face of adversity. As the aircraft taxied toward the runway, Phoenix looked out the window at the vast sky ahead. His father had turned an ugly incident into a movement for change, while Phoenix himself had discovered a strength he hadn't known he possessed. In the end, Hannah's attempt to put Phoenix in his place had instead revealed exactly where he belonged, anywhere his dreams might take him. If you love this story, like, subscribe, and share to others so they can learn too. See you in our next video.